Welcome back, guys. Getting to this drywall, getting it done. Man, what a pain. I do not like drywall. I am so happy that only 3 rooms in my house are drywall. Me and drywall do not get along. This is probably it's the 3rd time I've sanded drywall in this house. I think the first time was just the upstairs bathroom. I haven't sanded all the 3 rooms in one shot. So I've kind of sanded one and then puttied another and kind of skipped around a little bit, but it makes a mess. It gets all over the place. I've vacuumed this place so many times and there's a drywall it's kind of fell as I was putting it down and I've stepped in it. So I've got drywall splattered everywhere across the floor. The majority of the drywall is flat. Occasionally I ran through to the tape. I don't know if that's a big problem or not. I don't know how you do drywall without having a ridge. There's no way to do a drywall butt joint without having some type of ridge because it doesn't bevel down on the ends. It bevels down on the sides of the drywall. Like you can see here, here's where the bevel starts and here's where the bevel starts and the seam is in the middle. Well, that's on the long side of the drywall. You get over here to the end of the drywall and this piece, I believe this piece is standing upright. So you've got a bevel right here. You can kind of see the bevel line. But right here is the end of this piece of drywall and it's just squared off. So it's gonna have a hump there. And I'm not used to that. I'm a body man by trade. When I straighten a car, it's straight. You don't just make a bulge out of something. You know what I mean? If you've got a high spot, you tap it down with a hammer and you use a skim coat and it's dead straight when you're done. So I'm not used to straightening stuff out and having to make a bulge feather out a long distance. It's definitely not perfect, but it's getting there. I'm not going to do any more putty work. I've got primer. I'm going to primer the 3 rooms. If anything major stands out at that point, I'll address it before I texture. But I know from working on cars, when you're fixing something and trying to make it straight, it's a lot easier if it's all the same color. And the easiest way to do that is to throw some primer on it. So that's my next step. I've got this pretty flat, pretty close. I've wiped it down with a dry brush to get most of the dust off the walls. I'll go ahead and wipe it down with a rag or a sponge or something like that, trying to get too much moisture put back into this stuff. I've also got this board put up over here, and I threw a little putty on that just to flatten it out a little bit. It was kind of rough plywood, actually really rough plywood, and I want it to be a little bit smoother. So I went ahead and threw some putty on that, sanded it down, made it a little bit smoother. That's where the hot water heater is going to sit. The water filter down there and the little drain pan underneath it. So that's what my water heater is going to bolt to, nice and secure. I've got nice screws running down both sides of that plywood straight into the studs. The upstairs bathroom is about the same. It's not perfect. You can look at anybody that does drywall is gonna be able to look at these bathrooms and the laundry room. And just looking at it, you can kind of tell where the ripples are in it, where the imperfections are. But I'm not too concerned about it. I know if you hold a light to the wall, it's kind of a trick I learned doing body work. If you want to see all the imperfections of this wall, you hold a light shining that way, and then you look at the wall, and wherever there's an imperfection, it'll create a shadow. So I could go ahead and find all the imperfections in all these walls really quick and easy. But fixing them is a whole other story. It takes a long time. This is kind of dark in here. It's all basically done. But keeping in mind, my bathrooms, my laundry room, they're gonna have stuff on the walls. Pictures, mirrors, cabinets up against the wall. So there isn't a whole lot of wall space that's going to be visible later. And that's what I try and keep in mind as to where my cabinets are gonna go. Do I have to worry about that part of the wall right there? Or is something gonna cover it up? You know, I hate to sound like I'm cutting corners, but It's a thought process. You know, if you're gonna put a cabinet across a wall, like our cabinet in here, or better yet, our shower is gonna go in that corner. It's gonna come out, shoot, probably to this stud right here. And it's gonna come out almost to the window. So that whole corner is gonna get covered. Top to bottom, the whole thing. I'm probably overdoing it, really going over all this and making sure it's dead perfect. It's gonna get covered up. Over here, there's gonna be a countertop, a sink, a big mirror. Most of that's gonna get covered up. So there's a lot that I'm probably overdoing when I should just think about what I'm gonna put there. But I'm a perfectionist and I like things to be straight and clean, even if they're covered up. So I don't know. Now these bathrooms and the laundry room, I haven't been working on them constantly since my last video, my last update video. I've taken a break, I think 2 days out of this last week. I think it's been about a week since I posted an update video on my house here. I think my last video was an archery target. Before that, I can't remember. But I took a couple days off. I've got a problem with dogs coming through my neighborhood. More people are moving out here and being a little bit less than considerate of their neighbors. Now I've got my dogs fenced in a smaller area, smaller than I like. It's probably 70 by 80 foot area off the back side of our living quarters right now. For 3 dogs, that's kind of a small area. I realize that, but I've got them fenced in. There's been a few properties sell around me and people have moved in and they're not fencing their property. They're not even fencing a smaller area to keep their dogs in when they go off to work. They just let them run. They come through my yard, my dogs start barking, neighbors' dogs start barking. I've got to put an end to it. Unfortunately, I'm not one to go out and shoot somebody else's dog, even though I have the legal right. If their dog comes into my yard and messes with my chickens, which I've had a couple dogs running around my greenhouse where my chickens are, I've had to come out, send them packing. At that point, I have the legal right to shoot that dog. I don't want to shoot a dog. I'm not that type of person, especially because I know it's somebody's pet. It's not protecting their livestock. They don't have any livestock. It's just their pet that they like to come home to. So I don't want to go out and do that. But it's causing me to fence my 40 acres. Fencing 40 acres is a mile of fencing. It's a lot of fencing to do. So 2 days out of this last week, I spent down on my property line down here, thinning trees on the property line so I can put a fence up. I've also got to go to the back part of my property, which is 1,300 something feet. That whole back fence line, there's not even a line there where somebody's drawn it out. So I've got to stake that out and then start picking trees that I need to thin out so that I can do that fence line. Hopefully by the end of this summer, my 40 acres is fenced and I can let my dogs run the entire 40 acres. There is obviously this 3.5 acres around the house that I've already staked out that I'm going to fence to keep my dogs in while we're gone. But if they get out of that area, the rest of my 40 acres will be fenced, so they won't be able to get out of my yard. My whole goal with my animals is to keep all my animals in my yard. If I decide to get cows later, I want them to stay in my yard. I don't want them jumping a fence, pushing a fence down, finding a hole in a fence, anything. I don't want them getting into my neighbor's yard and disrupting their life. So I have spent some time putting some fence posts, cutting trees down, getting some stuff thinned out. Now it is a lot of work. Their fence line down there is only 660 feet, I want to say, somewhere close to that, 700 feet. We'll say between 600 and 700 feet. But there's a lot of trees that need to get cut down. Then I got to dig the stumps up. I've got to have a path that's about 10 feet wide to be able to put a fence up and work that fence and then walk the fence line and make sure that there's no problems with it. Yeah, I could just put a fence up in between all the trees, but it makes it harder, number one, to put the fence up, number two, to maintain that fence if you've got a lot of stuff in the way. I'll eventually get my backhoe out there, dig up all the stumps, smooth out the dirt just so I can kind of smooth out the little humps and dips and all that in it. Obviously it's coming down off one slope and going kind of back up and over, but we'll get it as smooth as possible and put a fence up. Hopefully by the end of the summer, my whole yard is fenced. I'm gonna get back on these walls, get a damp cloth and knock the rest of that dust off those walls, get them kind of wiped down. Hopefully not add too much moisture to those walls so it dries out really quick and I can get some primer put up on them. I've got some nice Bare Drywall Plus primer, big 5-gallon bucket of it down there. Put some primer on those walls. When that dries, I've got some texture. Spray some texture on the walls. See how good I am at texture. Well, it's got a coat of primer on it. It's kind of tiger striped, as they say, but it's there. It's just there to make sure that texture adheres to the drywall a little bit better. I figure it'll probably take at least a day, maybe a little bit longer for this primer to dry. I will try and remember to start a fire here when I'm done. Get this place warmed up a little bit. It is pretty warm outside though. In the shade, even with the wind kind of kicking the way it is today, it's 55 degrees. So not too bad for it isn't even February anymore, is it? March? We should still have snow on the ground though, and there's no snow. But it's working in my favor, so I'm not gonna complain. Believe it or not, this seam right here, out of all the times I went around and double checked that I had tape and putty everywhere, this little seam got missed every time. Didn't notice it until I was putting the primer on, so I've got to go back and put a little piece of tape and some putty there on both sides and smooth it out and put some primer on that, and we will be ready to go. So I'm going to hit YouTube up, do a little YouTube University research, see what the best way is to get a nice thick texture to cover any of the minor imperfections I'm seeing in these walls and the ceiling. So other than that little spot, it all looks pretty good. A couple imperfections here and there, but I'm not going to worry about it, not going to stress over it. We're going to get a nice thick texture on there and see what it looks like after that. Until next time, guys, go make something.